I invited everyone here today to get input and expert opinions on censorship and textbooks as I prepare to present my textbook reform plan. The point of education is to pass down knowledge and inform future generations. This can't be done with the current infiltration of politics in public schools. The Texas that's in our hearts, where you have the best public schools in the country, is not the Texas that we see around us today, where schools have the highest number of dropouts and the lowest SAT scores. Our public schools have become political playgrounds. We need to prepare our kids for greatness, and we'll never do that if we're giving them textbooks that have been censored by Rick Perry's partisan ideologues. Political censorship from partisan extremists on either end has no place in the classroom. And this has become a national issue. Because of the size of our state and our buying power, Texas influences what students are reading all across the country. Our State Board of Education has a virtual veto over textbook content all over America. On Monday, the State Attorney General issued some good news for Texas schools, but some bad news for Perry's partisan ideologues by limiting the State Board of Education's ability to censor textbook content. Rick Perry doesn't have the courage to join his Attorney General in keeping politics out of our kids' textbooks. This is why I'm presenting my textbook reform plan as part of my goal to retool our schools and make Texas schools the best in the country within the next 10 years.
First of all, the charge is simply false, that it's never unpatriotic, and it's certainly not unchristian to tell the truth. That doesn't even make any sense to me.
The lack of information is one of the more frightening things, but then there's also the censorship that luckily was stopped, but that was attempted by certain members of the State Board of Education wanting to remove information that's what they considered stealth language, their idea of censoring things that are in the textbook.
Can you give an example?
Yeah, the stealth language, they felt that by using words such as partners, couples, if they did not say a man and a woman or a married couple, that this was part of the homosexual agenda to get language into the textbooks to subvert the youth of Texas. And I don't know what they thought was going to happen, but this was their idea, and this was part of the way that they tried to censor information. But more importantly, it's the lack of information, that these kids are becoming sexually active as young adults, and they don't, some of the things that are included about how to not get pregnant or not get a sexually transmitted infection is to do things such as go to a prayer meeting and get plenty of rest. And these are things that are included in textbooks that the State Board has allowed to be in there.
I think to compromise these young people, their health and their futures for ideological promotion of a certain ideology is really criminal, and policymakers need to be called into question. And frankly, they need the ruler across their knuckles.
But even the way word problems are phrased in math books, the ideological police are very thorough. And I guess part of the problem, and this comes up in the health textbooks, is not only are they imagining instances of some kind of conspiracy behind the race, like you were talking about, but if the textbooks aren't actively promoting that very narrow right-wing agenda, then they're not acceptable.
What would improve the process in your way of thinking? Obviously that.
Well, I think they need to get out of the bureaucratic sort of set of how many people have to approve X, Y, and Z, and sort of streamline the process and add back into it review by experts in the field that are actually teachers and or affiliated with universities or other entities that have expertise in the area that we're looking at. And then have those people review the textbooks. The other thing I think that is a problem is that, we're talking about Texas right now, but in reality, because Texas is one of the biggest or the biggest purchaser of textbooks, that the textbook drafters or the publishers are having them drafted to meet what they anticipate the State Board of Education wants to see.
Which, as you said, was trying to restore some integrity to this process, make it run as the law says it. But of course, one member, at least of the Board of Education, has already announced how she intends to evade that ruling. So it seems to me that it's important to have a fairly thoroughgoing reform of the process. So bring in a separate bipartisan group, as you were talking about, and put more in the hands of experts. That it's not clear that there's any way to make the current process run the way it's supposed to run, where the Board of Education is supposed to just keep all the players honest in basically an open textbook market, that they're trying to be very heavy-handed regulators. And if that's their intention, then it just has to be taken out of their hands entirely.
I'm looking, toward the future, trying to get a system that will really work and try to take some of the politics out of the classroom. And I think all these ideas need to be discussed, and that's one reason we need a task force to look at it. And I think probably the biggest issue is textbooks, but there are other issues as well, where you see politics being brought into the classroom, and that's certainly not going to help us get to where we need to be in terms of having the best schools in the country.
Legislature, which clearly is the representative body, keeps telling them that they are not to have a lot of power, that the State Board of Education is supposed to be a weak force in the textbook process. The board itself keeps trying to claim more power. So you have two different elected institutions there, and I think it's clear that the legislature is the more representative one, but the board keeps ignoring that.
But is it fair to say they've continued to find a way to force themselves into the equation?
Oh, absolutely.
And I think it's the textbook process more than how the board is appointed, more than anything, because the textbooks are what the misinformation, the lack of information that's in the textbooks, and their power over what ends up going into the textbook is what's really the big concern. Because there needs to be some other way of getting the information in there that needs to be the correct information, all of the information that needs to be in the textbook. So it has to do, it's about somehow having a different way of adopting textbooks. The way it's set up right now is not working.